You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Dylan and Max, back at it, episode 70. I'm currently coming to you live from a courtyard in the greater Las Vegas area that I am subsidizing personally while I sit reserve and don't get used. So, while Dylan's in the comfort of his home.
It's just part of the glory, part of the incredible thing we call living the dream.
Part of the gig, Murray.
That's right. Part of the gig. Welcome to the 21.5 Show. It is the show for the professional pilots out there. My name is Dylan. I am still accumulating Marriott points as a business aviation pilot. While Max, on the other hand, is expending Marriott points exactly. As a major airline pilot on reserve.
Yeah. Oh, not where I live, unfortunately.
It's like the, you know how when they have like venture capital and like new startups and everything, and they have like a runway, and they talk about the runway as like the amount of time they can burn through their cash to like become profitable.
Yeah,
what's your
it's like with points?
Yeah, what's your Marriott point runway right now to get off reserve?
It's in a matter of single digit days. It's funny though. Man. The other one of the other guys that's here with me, he's got like 7 figures worth of points. So.
Oh, really?
His runway is quite substantial. Yeah, but looks like we're going to be back based at where we live here in a couple months, so should be all right.
Fingers crossed. You know how we do the donations on the website and we sell the little tchotchkes and stuff and sell it to everybody? Maybe we should start at like a Marriott point.
Go fund me in points.
If you could just give
Don't
Max.
worry. This won't be a problem for much longer.
Just wait, hold on. I mean, this. I just feel like this is a great opportunity here. You know exactly what I'm going to do here. For just 14,000 points, you can sponsor an airman for one night.
Are you junior and unfortunately sitting reserve on Fridays and Saturday nights when the point values are the highest?
The Marriott Vonvoy program may be able to help.
Sometimes you just gotta embrace the suck.
That's right.
That's what it is.
Absolutely. We actually I've got a show listed on the pipeline I've been dreaming about doing for a while on like the points and miles game and credit cards that you can use to earn points and collect travel rewards, etc. So that would be a fun one, I think. Very, very useful for certain folks, especially a lot of folks that are probably transitioning from business aviation to the airlines right now. So anyways, what else is new, Max? Any new updates at your company on the 5G saga?
It's just like everybody else. I mean, there's NOTAMs and might be affected, and they may have a workaround at some places, and it'll be on the release. And if you can't, then you can't fly a Cat 2 or higher, or you can't fly an RMP. And there's performance penalties and all kinds of stuff. I'm sure they'll get this worked out at some point.
Well, I was reading the blog. Advanced Aircrew Academy's got a great blog, and they just actually made a post about can 5G play nice with business aviation is what it was entitled. But the end of it, I really enjoyed. It said, well, the FAA and FCC are engaged in this beltway brawl. The FAA is doing what it does best, conducting risk assessments and issuing notices to air missions. These interim NOTAMs will restrict operations in selected airspace at airports and heliports for special authorization Category 1, 2, Category 2, 3, and RMP AR approaches. In other words, if the NOTAM is in effect, it's like your radial altimeter isn't operative and you're operating while it's deferred on your MEL.
But as far as businesses aviation, I mean, very, very few operators utilize any of those approaches. So
yeah. It's very true. It says it's a bit disappointing to know that your brand new $40 million jet may have the same approach capability as a Cessna 172, but have no fear. The FAA will eventually finish their homework and come out with ADs specific to particular radio altimeter models. In the meantime, check your NOTAMs carefully and temper your expectations. At least you'll be able to play Call of Duty from the patio while waiting for the weather to improve because you got 5G on your phone. So I thought that was a pretty clever little blog post from our friends over at Advanced Aircrew Academy. And if you need to brush up on your Category 1 ILS skills, they have an entire module, which we'll link to in the show notes on the ILS approaches. So,
ILS approach is so... We were just talking about this. I think we want to get a subject matter expert maybe from them on just to kind of break down the ILS. It's something that we all use all the time, and it's relatively old technology.
Yeah.
So I think it would be.
How many lobes are you getting into the hertz of the each lobe?
120 and 80 hertz lobes.
I mean, come on. That's riveting. Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Well, if you want to hear Max and a subject matter expert go deep on the different lobes and potentially even the service volumes of the ILS, send us some comments, info@215podcast.com, and we'll get that one in the pipeline there. That'll be a great one when you're on when you have like a red eye and you need to sleep, but you can't, but you need to try anyways. That'd be good. You could put that one on there.
You don't think that's interesting?
I do. I'm just kidding.
You remember the maximum, the capacity of a DME station? How many airplanes it can handle at once?
Oh, no. I shouldn't answer this publicly. I know that the last two digits are 99.
The first one is 1.
The first one is a 1. I'm pretty sure it's 1.
It's probably, that was probably right 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Who can say these days? There's a lot of maybe 5G's, maybe DME is next on the list of,
What RPM is the antenna spinning at in a VOR, Dylan?
That was on my CFI check ride.
Oh my God.
They asked me the RPM and then he's like, let's draw that in a sine wave.
All right. Well, speaking of the old days, let's read one of our reviews. It said, no truer words. 100% of the bacon and 50% of the daycare. That was a quote from our friend Ted in the last episode. No truer words have been spoken. I was laughing on my commute today at Ted, and it's a sobering reminder that we all deal with similar things in this business. Glad to share in some humor with Dylan and Max once again. I can't wait to hear some stories about P Live and the good old days. Cheers, aviators. And for those of you that don't know, P Live is short for Prescott Live, which was like the one nightclub that Prescott had and has since been long gone. I can't ever figure out how it went out of business when they had nickel beers on Sundays and penny drinks on Wednesdays. Literally true story.
And somehow they thought it was a really great idea to have this like nightclub with like a 21 and over side and then an 18 and over side too. It was just...
I would love to see in the books there. Let's see, how are we going to make a profit on penny drink night?
I can't believe that. That was written by Hall 5 Homie.
Are you serious?
That was his name. So I'm pretty sure it's a fellow Embry Riddleist from the Prescott days. He was probably at one of the P Live foam parties we were at.
Yeah, it probably was. Watch your hands.
Shoot us an email and with your address, and we'll send you some 215 stickers. I don't have any P Live stickers to send, but I would. Another interesting. This isn't really a review, but I just thought it was kind of a funny email. And this comes in from Gretchen, and she says, "Just wanted to let you know how much I really enjoy listening to your podcast. I'm a relatively new listener. Found your podcast when you interviewed Richie Mercado." The Army rotor transition in episode 43. Thought you'd get a kick out of the attached picture I took of my husband's GPS directions on his cell phone. He uses Waze, and after listening to the interview with the blimp pilot, I changed his vehicle icon to the Goodyear blimp. I giggle uncontrollably every time I see it driving down the freeway, and it reminds me of the amazing logistics work that goes into keeping the blimp up and running. Those blimp guys are rock stars. Thanks again for putting all the work into this podcast. Thank you, Gretchen. Appreciate that.
You're welcome, Gretchen.
Yeah. Our buddy Brian actually just sent me an incredible video of the Goodyear blimp. I'm going to post on the socials. He lives right by the blimp base, and it just like flew overhead while he was on the beach. It's super cool. So those are the reviews. Please, if you have time to write us a review, we'd certainly appreciate it. Spotify, Apple, iTunes, wherever you listen to the podcast. You can give us 1 star, 5 star. We appreciate humor, criticism, and praise. We take it all. And we'll send you some stickers if you do it. On to the mailbag, Max, brought to you by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com, all of the training information that your flight department needs. First email says, hey guys, I sent some feedback a while back here, but here I am again. You are now my favorite aviation podcast out there. The other 44 podcasts, we've now leapfrogged them all. Perfect. I just made the transition to 135 and I am in my first jet, which is a Challenger 300. I used to fly the King Air 350. It's funny you were talking about the statistics for runway incursions and the second highest being turboprops. Coming from a turboprop to a jet, I can say I am not surprised for several reasons. Number one, turboprops stop very well. The King Air I flew almost never needed brakes. I could just take it out of reverse into ground idle and then, tap the brakes at like 30 knots. Consequently, many turboprop pilots do not consider overruns a threat. The thing you don't think is going to get you will eventually get you. In a jet, you get the takeoff and landing data every single time. That's probably not the case for many turboprops. The numbers are often so close that pilots can easily get lazy, especially when you consider that many turboprops are operating under Part 91. Number three, people often use turboprops to get into smaller airports that never see a jet. This is why Surf Air had a lot of noise complaint drama at San Carlos, which is a 2,600-foot runway. Nothing bigger than a King Air or PC-12 at San Carlos, and honestly, I don't think I would take a King Air in there, but I have seen them there. And finally, number four, I am not sure the statistics differentiate between overruns and other excursions. Remember, some of these smaller airports have narrow runways, and it's also possible for the plane to exit the side of the runway. Again, the thing you don't think will get you will often get you. He says, you can tell I have a lot to say about this, and that is because I have had a lot of productive discussions with pilots, I roll, who know better than Beechcraft about why it's important to fly correct numbers in every aircraft. Anyways, love hearing the podcast and loving my transition to jets. And that's from Mike. I think he can bring some good points up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
You're right, Mike. That is true. And especially the one about the running the numbers too. I think in a King Air or something, especially, just being in that airplane a little bit, it's just so easy to just flip it on and go.
It's interesting. I was just talking to a buddy of mine who used to fly for Vontair, and he's telling me about flying that Piaggio and that airplane. So they have like mid flaps and landing flaps or full flaps, because you couldn't say degree because the canard had flaps and the wing had flaps. And there was all these flaps, I guess, working. And they it's kind of like in a 737, you very rarely land flaps 40 because unless it's like a real short runway or a real compelling reason to. And that airplane, I guess you would never land at full flaps unless there was a real reason to. But so they would land at flaps mid, and their rep speeds were like 140.
Really?
Turboprop. Yeah. It's crazy. And then he was telling me some other crazy things. Like it had electrical sensors in the rudder pedals that would control a hydraulic actuator for the nose wheel steering. And he said like the potentiometers would get like dirty or something. All of a sudden the nose wheel would just like kind of start to jiggle around and then like turn to the right. And they had guys like going off taxiways and stuff because it would just do uncommanded turns. And
jeez,
so, it sounds like it's a good thing that airplane's not flying too much. That might drive those numbers a little higher.
We got more. This is so funny. I mean, how much did we talk about this turboprop thing for like 10 seconds? And we got 2 really good emails on it. You want to read this other one we got on the same topic?
Sure. Max and Dylan, hope all is well. I've been a long-time listener to the show and really enjoy the content. While not a professional pilot, obviously, it's very helpful in my day-to-day life in keeping good pulse on the pilot and aviation industry from another perspective and some entertainment along the way. I'm currently listening to the last episode, 69, when the discussion of incursions, a question came up between you for how many turboprops versus jets are out there flying. I happen to have some of the tracking data pulled up during this section and dug out some numbers. Taking a quick look at the numbers of flights we tag as GA flights this year to date, so January 1st to the 13th, see below. This is the number of unique registrations we track on a daily basis operating within the U.S., including Alaska and Hawaii. Put some other points in there to show turboprops usually flying more legs than jets could also be a factor. I attached this sheet where this data comes from if you have some interest in additional numbers or look at it different. So daily jet seen, 3,430 versus turboprops, 1,340. Daily jet flights, 6,835, and daily turboprop flights, 3,035. So that's a difference
It's
in
about
legs,
half.
right?
Yeah.
So daily legs on jets per day on average 1.99. Daily turboprop legs per day on average 2.26. So he's saying that more exposure because they're doing more legs, which is more landings, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And
that
you want to give the background on how he sold this data?
That was from somebody who works for FlightAware. So I thought that was really interesting. But I think the other thing is too, remember in that when we talked about it before, you're like, I never see turboprops flying anywhere. And I think that was, he's trying to point out too, like, well, here's what they are. I mean, so it looks like basically about half, a little less than half the jets than turboprops. But also to be fair now, especially it's for you're flying out of the big airports too, where you're just not going to see them as much. True. But yeah, pretty interesting. So love all this turboprop knowledge we're getting.
Right.
I really miss flying the turboprop. I flew the King Air 200 and it was probably one of my favorite airplanes I ever flew. Next email comes from our buddy Jim Dunn at FlexJet, and he wanted to give us a little update of what's going on there. Starting March 1st, pay is being increased for new hire pilots from $100K to $125,000. In addition, the bonus potential went from 10% base salary to 15%. Just an update to what we talked about during our discussion. Wow. Oh, and then he finishes it off on an unrelated note. Really enjoyed the last 2 episodes on air traffic control and heavy helicopters. Also, Ted Lasso is one of my favorites, and the Diamond Dogs are awesome. I think you guys need a T-shirt with that on it. And that's from Jim.
Yeah, and I hope other people think that's as funny as we do.
Oh, I just got a message from another follower tonight, and he said, thanks to you guys, I just binged the entire first season of Ted Lasso this weekend.
Not a bad way to waste a weekend.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's a little eye-opening there. Up to $125K for first year at Flex.
I tell you, things are getting
that is very
a little
real.
too good for us old aviators here.
That's right.
All the airlines are offering double time, triple time. Everyone's jacking the pay raises. I don't mean to be negative, but I'm starting to get a little nervous.
Listen, every time in my career when I've been a pilot and I've said, it's too good to be true, watch out. You're about to get hit by a train.
Yeah, this is getting a little bit silly. But, at least it's not just the aviation industry. Everything is silly.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
Real estate, stock market.
But, hey, I'll tell you what. On a serious note, Jim, thanks for writing in. I was really impressed with how quickly they adapt, how quickly they're making changes, how quickly they're working with what's going on in the marketplace. So to me, I applaud this. Anytime you see companies reacting like that, that's great. So thanks for the update, Jim. Keep us posted on what's going on over at Flex. Okay. Next couple emails, more corrections to things we said erroneously. This is what I've learned is that pilots love the details, and then anytime we say something wrong, we hear about it.
It's good. We don't want
really
people getting the wrong idea.
Exactly. So when we give bad information, the good news is folks are out there to back us up, and we can all learn together by getting the right information.
Fortunately, we've never claimed to be the smartest aviators.
We're only the aviators that have figured out how to use a microphone and a recorder. That's about it. So these next couple emails, Max, are in reference to the flight advice we had with that we heard from with the pilot that could only hold a second class medical. And they've got some good info on that.
Hey guys, really enjoy the podcast. Always learn something new when I listen. I just wanted to provide a little insight into medical requirements for Part 135. A first-class medical is required for PIC in a turbojet since an ATP is required. A first-class medical is also required for the PIC in eligible on-demand operations in multi-engine turboprops as well. Eligible on-demand allows operators to fly in airports without weather reporting and use less stringent runway landing data factors. Our charter department has set the standard for our PICs to obtain first-class medicals in order to qualify for EOD in our King Airs. Although if an excellent pilot came about, that could not meet this requirement, we would consider making an exception as it's not required for most operations. From Brandon R.
Okay.
Glad we cleaned that up.
Mm-hmm. And then follow up from the Messiah, Jason Herman, as well. He gives a great list.
The Messiah of what? Of knowledge?
Of, yes, aviation knowledge. That you're the one that gave him the update, or the nickname. But he gave us a great list of when you need that first class medical: Part 121 PIC, Part 91K PIC of a multi-engine turbine powered airplane, aka fractional PIC in a jet, Part 135 PIC in a jet, Part 135 PIC in an aircraft with 10 plus seats, and Part 135 PIC in a multi-engine airplane that conducts commuter operations. And then second in command in flag or supplemental Part 121 operations requiring 3 or more pilots, and any pilot in Part 121 operations who has reached their 60th birthday.
Oh.
And then he gives the references. Yeah. So a few more. And then he finishes it up with the references. I'll put those in the show notes, Part 61, 91, and 135. And then also he says Part 135 SIC does not require a first-class medical by regulation, but Part 135 turbojet PIC does. Basically, anywhere that the regs require a pilot to exercise his or her ATP privileges requires a first-class medical. Everything else is a second class for commercial operations with some limited exceptions like flight instruction, etc. So anyways, Max, it was kind of like what he'd originally said, corporate was basically his avenue, his best shot here, if he wants to be a captain one day.
Which, of course, the one thing that did not say anything about was Part 91, Jet PIC.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. That's why.
Fair game.
That's why. Yeah. And James's advice was like, look, go make yourself stand out. Go make yourself a safety expert. Go make yourself, give yourself some additional out of cockpit qualifications that really make you stand out to a corporate operator. And in this current market.
Yeah. No better market to make that all happen.
Yeah. You're not going to be a guy that's going to leave for the airlines. People are going to know that. So still opportunities out there. Next up, donations. Chad O sent us some cheese, some New Year cash. We appreciate that, Chad. Really excited to receive a little support for the show. We'll send you a little thank you gift. And big news, I'm just placing the order this week for our new merch for our next giveaway, our donation giveaway. I think you're going to really like these. These are classy. It's good. I'm going to reveal it on the next episode.
In on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am excited.
Quite exciting. So we'll have those to reveal on the next episode. If you want to donate to the show, just go to 215podcast.com. Scroll to the bottom. There's a donate button. And you can give us $5 or $100. Maybe you should give us like $25 so we can go buy a FAR AM. Look up those medical questions.
Next up, flight advice brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt. Harvey Watt is the largest provider of loss of medical insurance in the aviation business. It's not just for airline pilots anymore. Corporate pilots, any pilot. Where you rely on flying for your income, you should protect your medical with insurance through Harvey Watt.
HarveyWatt.com. Links in the show notes. Okay.
Howdy, gents. You cover a lot of great info on your podcast, including interview stuff with James. Any chance you could do a bit on letters of recommendation? I've worked with several pilots that are now looking to make the move, whether to an airline or better corporate type gig. I can search the internet for examples, but there are many, if any, aviation specific. I'm sure you guys might know someone that could give some good ideas on how to formulate a letter to show the applicant in the best light. Peter R.
Letters of recommendation. Do you remember asking for those when we first started?
Like, yeah. Go ahead and write it up and I'll sign it.
Yeah, exactly. That was the classic when I remember when I was first starting out. So, all right. Well, so the listener asked for James's info. James actually talks about letters of recommendation in a previous episode, and I'll have a link in the show notes to that. But I will also summarize what he said. And this is basically what I've started to do when I'm writing a letter of recommendation for somebody. But what he said is you've got to relate it and make it something that will stand out to the person that reads it. So a bad letter of recommendation is, oh, I flew with this guy, he's really sharp, you'd love to share the cockpit with him. I'm sure any crew will really enjoy spending a 4-day trip with them, which is what I've seen a lot of letters of recommendation say. He says, instead, make it something real and relatable. Like, hey, you know what? I was going through a really hard time and I called my buddy Jason, and Jason was there for me and he helped me out. He came over and helped me on his day off to move or do something or whatever. Give a real example of how somebody could be there for you, support you, or when you're in trouble and when your back was against the wall, you went to that person to help you out. Hey, we were on this trip, we had a breakdown and we were having a hard time sourcing a part, but my co-pilot, Derek, he was able to go out and use his contacts to find a part and, go the extra mile for us. Something like that, I think, carries a lot more weight than something more generic. Any thoughts on that, Max? Do you recall that?
Instead of something so generic, like you said, it's pointing to a real life experience, I think is.
Yeah.
Because people that are reading those read a lot of letters of recommendation. Yeah. And certainly I can't imagine that it carries as much weight when you see it's just the same letter you've written for 5 different people.
Yep. So, and keep in mind too, that a lot of the people reading them might not be pilots. So the letter of recommendation says, oh man, you can fly the greatest ILS down to minimums versus,
that's the thing. It doesn't always have to be about flying or aviation or something about being on a trip. It could be anything.
Yep. I'll tell you what, I have had incredible success. I actually write a lot of letters of recommendation.
Oh, do you? What are you, like a big shot?
No, I'm not. Well, here's where I'm getting to. Yeah, I was the president of the Arizona Business Aviation Association, and we had a lot of people that worked there, and then we were all in a volunteer capacity. And I'll tell you what, man, doing that kind of volunteer stuff, those letters of recommendation stood out for people. It was so easy to write those, and they sounded so good for people. Hey, I'm the president of the organization. This person volunteered on this committee. They were always there to step up for us. When we needed something to happen for an event, they were the first person I would call, and they would always get it done. And those carry a lot of weight. That's the kind of stuff that carries a lot of weight. And I say that not to make myself sound like some incredible person, but to tell you, there are a lot of nonprofit groups that you can get involved in that will really, really help you stand out against the crowd. A lot of volunteer opportunities. And those are the types of letters of recommendation you will get by being involved in organizations like that.
And what James always says too, it's everybody has so-and-so hours and type ratings and yada, yada. It's the out of cockpit experience and all the other things that really make you stand out. And so that's just a great example of how to highlight that in another way besides on your resume or somewhere else may get overlooked. There's no overlooking it in a letter like that.
Exactly. So another reason why that out of cockpit experience will help you get those really solid letters of recommendation instead of getting 3 letters of recommendation from 3 line pilots you flew with.
Yeah. May as well get one from your mom too.
It just like, even if it's from your local church or any type of local group that you're involved with, or even a friend, like I said, dude, the guy helped me move at the light. There was no one else available, or he stepped up to help me out. I think all that stuff's very valuable. So good email, Peter. I'll send you, I'll post the link for James's segment where he talks a little bit more about it as well. But I think that is a very valuable question. All right. Well, if you need a letter of recommendation, the donation button is on the bottom of the website. It's 215podcast.com. Scroll to the bottom and
shameless.
All right. Well, that is flight advice brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt. If you need some flight advice, visit our website. You can send us an email, info@215podcast.com, or click on the flight advice form if you want to send it in anonymous. And no Diamond Dog today, but we can bring in Diamond Dog if required to provide advice. Coming up, Max. Tiny. Coming up, Max. Parts. If you are an airline pilot, you are probably not. You are blissfully unaware of this parts situation that's going on right now. If you're in business aviation, you are acutely aware of what's going on right now.
Better watch your tires, boys and girls.
Yeah, things you take for granted, like tires, you just can't get them. Oh, sorry, your airplane's only certified to use one type of tire and the factory's shut down, maybe in 5 months. How's that phone call going to go with your boss? Sorry, bro.
And he came, what? What?
Yeah.
What are you going to say?
What are you talking about? We got to go to Geneva next week and we don't have tires? That's just one example. Windshields, parts are insane right now. I mean, set aside the fact that the costs are going way up, but they just aren't there. So we had a great conversation with a couple of the guys at JSSI, Jim and Forrest, and they just did a great job of explaining what is going on in the marketplace and kind of helping us to prepare our owners, principals, and companies that we work for. Like, hey, here's what's going on. And I think a smart chief pilot or director of maintenance is going to probably start to educate their folks on the possibilities, because I don't think anyone wants to get that phone call.
It's a major threat to the operational reliability of your airplane.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get to it.
Max, we're very honored to have a couple special guests from JSSI Parts and Leasing joining us today. It's Jim Sellers. He's the Chief Commercial Officer, and Forrest Bullard, outside sales representative. We want to have you fellas on the show today to talk a little bit about the wonderful world of aircraft parts, mysterious world, and I would say even in this day and age, frustrating world of aircraft parts. So welcome to the show, fellas. Jim, could you just tell us a little bit about JSSI Parts and Leasing and share some of your expertise with us?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks Dylan and Max for having Forrest and I on to talk about aircraft parts. Interesting world that Forrest and I have navigated over the last 20 years or so. So we have a lot of experience, a lot of good stories, and we appreciate sharing and discussing this with you and your audience today. And congratulations on the podcast as well. I had a chance to listen to a couple of the episodes, and you guys have done a great job. Again, we're just very glad to be a part of that. So thank you. Yeah. So for starters, I guess we'll for your audience, it might be beneficial just to give them an overview of JSSI or Jet Support Services if they are unfamiliar with JSSI to start, and then they can kind of drill down to our parts and leasing business. So JSSI has been around for 33 years, in which we provide hourly cost maintenance programs for aircraft owners and operators. It's a budget stabilization tool that allows them to manage the operational costs of their covered assets, whether they be engines, airframes, or APUs. And we support that program by providing a high level of customer service and technical service to facilitate the off-wing engine events and unscheduled maintenance events as they come due. And, JSSI is sort of positioned in the market as an independent advisor, to the industry. And, we have a unique position in which we are going up against the behemoths of the industry, the Rolls-Royce, Honeywells, GEs, Pratt & Whitneys, and being a little bit of an underdog in that aspect. And I think, the JSSI history is, driven from the entrepreneurial attitude of the employees, in which drive the business every day. And, over the years, we've seen tremendous growth in the HCM business, which we call our hourly cost maintenance business, and further growth into parts and lease, which is something we created organically 8 years ago as we're facilitating all the maintenance events. And, every maintenance event, as we all know, comes with invoice, which includes parts and labor. And one way in which we thought we could add value to our hourly cost maintenance programs, or where we identified a way to add value to our hourly cost maintenance programs, is by the advanced procurement of inventory in support of those forecasted maintenance events. So build an inventory at the pricing or the cost position where we can facilitate utilizing our inventory for those maintenance events at a lesser price than we've either historically paid or anticipate to pay if we had to go direct to the manufacturer. So through that method, we created a procurement team to support all of our hourly cost maintenance programs, working side by side our tech services team. And our tech services team is a team of 75 global representatives that are working direct with our clients to manage those covered assets under the HCM programs. And the creation of JSSI Parts and Leasing was really, again, driven to identify those opportunities in which we can save money in the procurement side of the business for supporting those material requirements that are going into each event. And as we built that inventory, we knew there'd be a third-party market or a market for customers that may not be on an HCM program to facilitate their material requirements as well and create that rotable pool of inventory. And then over the years, JSSI has also created an advisory services organization where we're performing aircraft appraisals, asset inspections, and utilizing that technical expertise and providing advice to aircraft owners and operators. And then through acquisition, JSSI continues to sort of build out that model of that independent advocate for the business jet owner and really being part of the entire process of aircraft ownership, from the initial review of aircraft all the way through the end-of-life solution. So the acquisition of Conklin & Decker 3-4 years ago helps identify aircraft for a potential aircraft owner that meets their mission profile, compares assets or compares options for what they may consider particular requirements. And then more recently in 2021, we completed 2 acquisitions of maintenance tracking software businesses in Sierra Tracks in early 21, and more recently Traxall in December of 21. So both of those, again, sort of align with that independent advocacy for business jet owners and operators, and also aligns us with, the entire aircraft ownership process, from that initial review of which aircraft to choose, to enrolling on a HCM program, enrolling on a maintenance tracking software program, supporting the aircraft with material through our parts and leasing business, and then ultimately the disposition of the aircraft at the end of the life of the business.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting, that you guys are kind of on your own versus everybody else that's tied to a manufacturer of either the engine or the airframe, which I imagine has its challenges, but probably, I think, a lot of benefits for the customer. Because I know with the manufacturer programs, I always feel like that's not their only, that's not their only deal and their only business. And somehow I'm being funneled somewhere else to make money, from other avenues. But so I guess, one of the interesting things I think for pilots when you're talking about parts and engine programs and stuff is more, it's like, yeah, great. It's this much an hour. And when we need a part, we call this person and so and so. But when you're acquiring a new airplane and you're trying to decide either to keep the programs that the airplane's already on, or to enroll in some sort of new program that maybe the airplane wasn't on, how do you guys, what kind of suggestions can you give us to explain? I mean, it's kind of 3 or really 2 animals, the engines and APU maybe kind of in one, and the airframe in the other. But like, what kind of suggestions could you give us to describe why that's beneficial to the owner?
Sure. So, I think JSSI, again, is uniquely positioned to offer an aircraft owner, complete tip-to-tail program with one single contract. You could enroll your engines with the engine manufacturer, the airframe with the airframe manufacturer, and the APU with the APU manufacturer, and have 3 separate contracts to manage. Through JSSI, you can consolidate that into one contract that's comprehensive enough to cover the aircraft from tip to tail. And I think, as aircraft are transitioning, it's really depends on the life cycle of that aircraft and really ultimately your utilization of that aircraft, to drive the decision of which engine program to choose, because there are multiple layers of engine programs you can choose with different coverage options, depending on, again, your expected utilization of the aircraft. These programs, have value, and the value will help drive the resale value in a future state as well. So there's a lot that needs to go into making that decision. I ultimately think it's really what your motivations are as an aircraft owner and the utilization of the aircraft. But the program is there to provide a service, to be that advocate on your behalf, to be that resource, whether it be technical or even provide some level of customer service when it comes to facilitating maintenance. And also, a resource for future planning and considerations. And I think JSSI is uniquely positioned to do that and, create value for each aircraft owner and operator that's on a program.
Yeah, kind of the way that I've explained it too is when I go into these things, the first thing the owner asks is, well, so is this going to save me money? And I would say, I don't know. It depends. If you have the average airplane that breaks in the average amount and everything like that, then no, because, you're going to pay about what it costs plus a little bit because the program company has to make some money to operate that airplane. If you're unlucky and some big parts break, and then, yeah, you may come out ahead. And if you're, got a better than average airplane, you may come out behind. But what it gives you, if you want to know what this airplane is going to cost, if you want me to narrow this budget down every month and tell you what it's going to cost, if you can tell me how many hours you're going to fly, I can get really close with a program because I can do the basic math in months and hours you're going to fly, if it's on engines or whatever, and I can give you a really solid number. Now, if you don't, then you want to take the risk, and you could potentially save money. This is what I say, if you don't have any engine problems, you're going to overhaul, it's a relatively inexpensive, overhaul. If your hot sections are good and you don't have a lot of parts, then you may save some money in the long run, but you may have some really big bills one month and some really small bills the next month. And that's kind of the way I explain it. I mean, would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah. And I think the engine program or maintenance program is not for everybody. I mean, we sort of joke around, Bill Gates doesn't need an engine program or a maintenance program. I think he has enough cash sitting around where he can sort of self-reserve, but I think if, an owner or operator looking for budget stabilization is looking for a certain level of comfort that when a unscheduled or scheduled maintenance event is coming due, that it's already been funded, it's taken care of. He has the team in place to facilitate and arrange that maintenance on their behalf. I think it's a very valuable tool in that sense. I think, it's a bit speculative to assume, when an unscheduled event is going to happen and whether or not that's really going to pay off. But I think the program is designed in such a way that if you understand your utilization, you can back into the value that the program adds, when the maintenance is coming due and coordinate, your budget accordingly and find the value through the program offering that JSSI can provide.
I mean, another huge consideration too with an engine program is on purchase, right? So if you're buying a pre-owned airplane and it's been on a program and say it's midlife on the engines, right? I mean, obviously you're paying for that money that the owner's paying into every month. The previous owner has been added to the value of that airplane because it's coming with, engines that are paid for halfway, essentially is the way to think of it. And so that's kind of a really important thing. We've seen people that have been like, I'm not doing those programs, I'll just pay cash. And it's like, no, dude, you're already paying for the first half of the motors or, sort of on purchase, given the value of the airplane. So that could be a real way to shoot yourself in the foot if you give somebody the wrong advice to be like, you just pay cash, it'll be fine. And then all of a sudden it comes on a Gulfstream for $1.2 million per motor, and you're like, was this on a program?
Right. And that's a good point, is the aircraft are transferring owners and, they come from a program coverage option and, they're looking, the new owner's looking at whether or not this is the right fit for them. Essentially they would lose out. They're paying for the program value. And then if they drop the program, they're going to lose that value, going forward. So, I think, and that's one of the things that we are focused on is really getting to those new aircraft deliveries with these HCM programs, because we want to be with that aircraft through the life of the aircraft as it transitions from owner to owner and continue to provide that value. So there's also uniqueness in the JSSI program in which there's transfer options and, being able to, if you're going to move from one platform to another, if you're on a Bombardier program or another OEM program and you want to transfer to another aircraft, you can't really take that balance with you to another manufacturer's program. And I think the uniqueness within JSSI and the flexibility in which we offer these programs allows you to, transfer that balance over to another program. Obviously, you lose the value if you're going to resell the current aircraft that you operate that's currently covered under the program. But I think that flexibility, and again, kind of going back to the core entrepreneurial attitude of JSSI to find a solution for the customer, is really what drives us day in and day out to come up with a solution that works.
So, fellas, let's shift gears for a minute and talk a little bit about the current parts marketplace. I think for most of our listeners that are in business aviation, most of us are pretty acutely aware of the difficulty for some parts on the market. At a high level, can you guys just tell us, maybe Forrest, what are you seeing out day to day with your customers who are needing parts, delays, just what's going on out in the marketplace?
Yeah, obvious issues going on, not only in the aircraft parts world, but just supply chain in general. And that's has trickled down into our market. The big thing that a lot of people are talking about now are the tires, and you guys have maybe heard that is there's massive delays from the manufacturers in producing these tires. And it's been pushing back many, many months at this point. I just got an update this morning on some G5 nose tires, and we're looking at least 4 months before the repair shops are going to take delivery of, their standard back-ordered tires. So, airplanes aren't flying without tires. You flat spot one or have some FOD or something like that. This can be an AOG situation. We're burning through wheels exchanges to alleviate that situation and trying to buy surplus tires wherever found, but that's definitely one of the major issues right now. In addition to tires, there's windscreen issues, many months out, GKN, PPG, they're all highly back ordered. So these are AOG creating situations with some of these parts and the supply chain issues that have been going on.
Say you were an airplane owner of a mid-sized jet, which you could say pretty much everybody has. Which manufacturers are the worst with parts, and the best right now?
It really depends, but there's some companies that are easier to work with than others. But, I would say Embraer can have issues there. You kind of you're stuck with them. There's not a whole lot of third-party aftermarket with Embraer. So when Embraer doesn't have anything, you're kind of in a bind. There's some support outside of them, but it's limited. Now with a Gulfstream or a Bombardier product, there's been aftermarket for many years, even though these OEMs are trying to pull everything kind of back in-house. There has been third-party support for a while now, unlike Textron, which has been quite proprietary for a long time. And then as these aircraft age as well, parts availability gets harder.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, like with my experience with Gulfstream. So I used to manage and run a G3 for a long time. And when we would have a parts need for a component, a lot of times we could call the manufacturer of that component and buy one or have it overhauled or whatever. And you would never have to talk to Gulfstream about it. Mm-hmm. And then we got a 450. So a couple generations down the road, and we call and they're like, oh, yeah, we make that. I said, great. Can we, what does it cost to get it overhauled if you have an exchange? Like, oh, we can't sell it to you. I'm like, what do you mean you can't sell it to you? They're like, well, yeah, we have a license with Gulfstream now, so now they're the only ones that can sell it. And you're like, oh, and so everything got, the price control move, obviously, and everything got so much more expensive with that. And it's just such and Textron too. It's just, but the thing, you'll have to forgive me because of this parts situation really gets me fired up sometimes with these manufacturers. But like one of the things I learned the hard way with Textron, it's like we had this new airplane, it's a relatively new airplane we bought. It's under warranty. I'm like, this will be, it's perfect. And we had like a part in the braking system that failed. And they're like, oh, well, that's not covered under warranty. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, no, well, that's not a part that Cessna or, actually produce. That'd be like the part on the airframe. Like, I'm like, so you're telling me like the only things that are warranted are like the ailerons and the rudder and like sheet metal, because everything else are components made by some other manufacturer. And they're like, well, sort of. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, okay, but I can't go to the manufacturer of the part you won't warranty to buy it. I have to buy it from you. is that correct? And they're like, yes, that's how it works. That's like, that sent me through the roof.
And that is that's a trend that I don't see going away. Bombardier used to be pretty open. Challenger's been around forever, Learjets, and a lot of third-party support. But as they roll out new aircraft, they are proprietizing things. And whether, company ABC built this, like you were saying, they've got licensing agreements where you cannot send it to them direct. You have to go through their funnel to allow them to work on your part. And it can be quite frustrating.
So for some of these parts, like getting back to what you mentioned with the tires, and this is probably a dumb question, but the Gulfstream nose tire, is there only one manufacturer and one approved nose tire? Are there multiple different vendors? Is the better solution to try and find get more vendors approved? How does that work?
So on the tires specifically, it really depends on the airframe. There's a Michelin tire, there's a Dunlop tire, there's a Goodyear tire, but they're all rated, for different speeds, different weights. So like a 601 will have a different tire, a main wheel tire, than a 604 or a 605. So it really depends on the airplane. But the issues that we're seeing right now are specifically with the Goodyear manufacturing tires. And depending on who you talk to, some folks, within the supply chain issue, it's actually the rubber itself. They don't have the rubber to build the tires, where Michelin has done a better job in getting those natural resources to keep their factory lines full, for whatever reason has not. And they're way behind in producing these things.
And so, you're basically just, if Goodyear's all you can use, you're kind of stuck, right?
Right. And, and these tires also have a shelf life too. So, you might find some tires somewhere, but they're 10 years old. You don't want to slap those on your airplane.
Max and I are going to start an overhaul exchange company for tires. I think maybe that's can you do that? Just a little hot patch?
A retread company? Yeah.
The retreads. I don't know if you want to get into the retreads.
They do it in Phoenix right down the street. There's just a little tar on there. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's not very much liability, so it shouldn't be a big deal.
It's fine. At your own risk. Time to take a quick break to give our listeners an important reminder to never take financial advice from a pilot, unless they also happen to be a certified financial planner. Of course, we're talking about our friend Tim Pope, who's been helping professional pilots nationwide create and execute a smart financial strategy. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight. Check the show notes for a link to book your free appointment with Tim. All right, back to the show. You guys are saying that you try and inventory parts, right? Like, obviously, especially if you have access to the maintenance tracking and stuff, you can kind of see what's going on for your clients. Is there strategies for inventorying parts, or you just kind of get whatever you can get? Can you talk a little bit about that process, Jim?
Sure. So, we have, a team of material planners and analysts, that we put to work to take a look at the JSSI forecast for our covered fleet, and that's really driven by flight hour reporting. And, it's sort of piggyback on the tire issue that we were talking about earlier. I think the, increased flight hour activity that we saw in 2021, is also having the impact on, the production schedules and being behind the curve there. So, as one of the big metrics that JSSI uses to manage the business is flight hour activity and flight hour reporting from our existing clients. And across the board, I think year over year from 2020 to 2021, we were up 25% in flight hours. So, I think everybody's seeing, that dramatic increase in activity across the business jet sector. And, when we take a look at what material we need to be provisioning for and planning for, it's driven by those flight hour reports that are sort of feeding our program status and in program support to forecast when those events are coming due. And then we take a look back at historical parts consumption on those particular events. And then it drives a list of parts that we should be analyzing for advanced stocking. So that's sort of to cover the JSSI HCM program. But we also have a dedicated product line team broken out by manufacturer that are, cultivating a deep understanding of particular components of the engines and airframes by manufacturer to understand where are there sort of demand issues in the market and where we should be focusing our attention, and getting creative in the acquisition of not only just buying part number 1, 2, 3, but buying the next tire assembly and dismantling that part to get to the core component of what's driving some pain points in the supply chain process. At a sort of macro scale, I mean, that goes to our aircraft acquisition business, in which we're buying complete aircraft to harvest, the engines to support lease requirements, harvesting, the airframe components to support sort of those supply chain issues that we're seeing in the market, and also just to create value in the market, to provide a competitive solution or a competitive alternate option for a business jet owner and operator. So, I mean, I think that's sort of our approach when it comes to analyzing the data to drive the parts we should be proactively shopping for.
That's really interesting what you say, Jim, about having to purchase maybe airframes to harvest a part. I didn't really think about that. One of the questions we were going to ask you about was like airplane graveyards. And I know people have had to go in there for older airframes to find support. So is that kind of the new generation of kind of doing the same thing?
I think that's one approach. I mean, I don't think that was really, part of the consideration when we went into acquiring aircraft and parting them out. I mean, I think we just saw opportunities in the marketplace where we could create value by supporting our own covered maintenance events with material, engines, and, driving third-party opportunities because of the, utilization increase and supply chain issues. I mean, it just sort of kind of folds in nicely that we have access to, virtually every part on an aircraft that you may want. And, as aircraft manufacturers focus on, their latest production aircraft and the older, aircraft that are no longer in production, they get less attention. But I think a lot of those older aircraft are sort of driving the increased flight hour activity because of the low cost of operation, which is putting some strain on that supply chain as well, because I don't think any manufacturer was anticipating, this dramatic increase on some of these out of production aircraft.
So you're announcing that you're buying all old Hawker 700s. Is that what you're saying? All West Winds.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
If they've got good windshields.
That's right. I mean, I read something about the Lear 45 windshield issue, same type of thing. So maybe, fellas, and I don't know if either of you want to comment, if I'm an apartment manager and I'm talking to my principal, the aircraft owner, what would the conversation you'd recommend that I have just in general to kind of, if they're not aware of the parts marketplace, I feel like it's important for us to kind of communicate some of that to an aircraft owner so that they're prepared, because there are some stuff, it sounds like totally out of our control, right? If the factory's not making the tires, then there's nothing we can do. Have you guys had to have that conversation for us with anybody?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, there's so much dynamic here. It depends on how your flight department is set up, but there's certain parts that I see as beneficial to having in your possession, like a wheel, a main wheel or a nose wheel. A lot of people carry those on the airplane even, but to have a ship set of wheels that you can then, when you have an issue or when your tire's worn, you put yours on and then you send out the off for repair. And that alleviates any downtime there. So that's a common one that an operator will have in their hangar is a set of wheels. But the way that everything works nowadays is you can get most parts next day if they're available. So you don't necessarily need to tie up, hundreds of thousands of dollars on your shelf, waiting for that failure when you can call somebody like JSSI Parts and get the majority of your requirements the next day. Because, a windshield on a Gulfstream is $60,000 and it might fail, every few years. So you don't really need to have $60,000 on the shelf for a few years, when you can let somebody like us stage that for you.
That makes sense.
And to add, I think, part of that conversation needs to be, how you shop for parts, in making sure the owner is comfortable with utilizing the aftermarket. I mean, I think the aftermarket in having suppliers beyond just the manufacturers on your speed dial is important, because I think provides you options as a buyer in support of that particular aircraft, understanding which options are available. As I talked about earlier, the way that our business is structured is we have these product line experts, and we have team members around the globe that are scouring the market for equipment that is available from aircraft that may have transitioned from one owner to another, and they didn't sell the main base kit of components when they with the aircraft sale. So there's this rotable pool of inventory that was left behind that we see value in acquiring, and we'll stock that material in support of our customers. And having that knowledge as an aircraft owner or a DOM of a very well defined vendor network, I think creates value and also that support system you need in order to maintain your aircraft.
So do you guys take in parts that something's failed and the customer sends the part, you send them the new one and get them on their way? Do you take the part and then are you replacing with an overhaul exchange one right away, or do you take that faulty part, send it off to wherever, and wait the few weeks to have it overhauled and then get it back and put it on the shelf for the next person that's in need? Or are you just rotating overhaul exchange parts all the time?
Yeah. So for our own existing inventory, as we facilitate an exchange and we get the client's core or failed part back into our inventory, we'll route that out to a repair vendor to have that service repaired or overhauled and get that back on our shelf. If there's an option, to exchange that core to get a faster return so we can backfill that rotable pool from our vendor network, we may consider that. But the typical process would be to send the client's core out for repair and get that back on the shelf and continue to turn that inventory.
Yeah, it's a good model because it's basically everybody in that type airplane is sharing the cost of having those parts on the shelf. Like I know when I managed airplanes, certain parts that you knew were going to fail with some sort of regularity, like I would buy an extra one and then I would keep one and same as JSSI, I would send it off, have it overhauled and wait the time because it's much less expensive than buying an overhaul exchange part, as everybody knows. And then I would take that, put it on the shelf. But when you're doing that as a sole operator, it's a lot of capital just sitting on a shelf where it's nice. That provides a lot of benefit, I think, when you're in a program where everybody's sharing the cost of those parts sitting on the shelf. It's a more efficient way of doing that.
Like some of those common failure items, like a display or something where you could be on a HAP program, and therefore that is another way to kind of fix your cost, where if that Honeywell product fails, you're covered. They'll send you an exchange, get a working one in there so you don't have to have that asset on the shelf. And one of those exchanges could cover the cost of a HAP program.
Yeah, for some reason I have this weird feeling that that's how it's designed, how Honeywell's designed it. Is it kind of force you into their product program? Does anybody else get that feeling?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I get really, that's my other horse I like to sit on is about Honeywell and how pissed off I get about these IRUs they send and then fail the next week. And
yeah, there's maybe some planned obsolescence there, huh?
Oh yeah, there's definitely. I love when they have airplanes that are in current production and they send you notices that things are going to be obsolete. You're like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? The CDU is going to be obsolete and it's $80,000 to exchange it. I'm like, but
yeah,
this is what it is.
It's a big scam, this whole thing, I tell you.
So I wanted to maybe see if you guys could help us pull back the curtain a little bit on a process that I didn't really understand a lot about, but that's we're AOG and we're going to counter to counter. I hear that term thrown around. It took me a little while to figure out what it meant, who's involved. Forrest, can you talk about if you have a client and you're trying to get a part to him right away, what the fastest and most efficient way to do it? Is it always just shipping it via FedEx or can you talk about the different options?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and most people may have experienced this recently, even with the holidays and whatnot, but these shipping companies they're not doing well right now. Lots of missed packages, missed pickups, lost packages. I've got one dealing right now. UPS Blue went out the other day and it never showed up. Lost part. And it's on their account, so it's hard for us to kind of file a claim, and they've got to do that on their end, and frustrating, right? But as far as AOG goes, on our end, we like to vet that AOG. Is it a true AOG? Are you going to miss a flight, a revenue flight? Is the principal not going to get on the airplane? So we want to make sure that it's a true AOG. But companies like Sterling Courier is kind of the known entity for a reliable AOG shipping service. So they'll utilize, airlines, courier services, anything they can to get that part to you as quick as possible. And the other half of their business is actually medical, organs and that kind of thing. So, so priority and quickness is up their alley. There's other companies out there that try to emulate Sterling. We use a handful of them, but Sterling seems to be the biggest and the most reliable in our opinion.
So for anyone that doesn't understand this process, for us, basically, I mean, when you're hiring a courier, there's a person is actually going and physically grabbing the part from the inventory and getting on an airliner, right, and flying to you.
Yeah, that's one of the ways, right? They'll send through their network, they'll send somebody out in a car, even an Uber. They'll pick up the part and they'll bring it to the airport, and sometimes somebody will hand carry it. Sometimes it'll go underneath, but that's usually the quickest.
It's fascinating, but I mean, and it's not cheap, but if you're going to miss a flight, it's definitely worth. I remember a few times, even when we were trying to operate an old King Air, we'd have two pilots and we'd send a pilot out to go get parts sometimes, just because, there's, you got to be, flexibility is the key to air power, as we say on this show. And you got to be creative sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I worked overseas for a few years, and in China, actually. And we would order almost everything via Sterling just to get it there on time. And, our Sterling bill was 50 to 60 grand a month. So it's not cheap, but you miss a revenue flight, and that'll cover that in a second.
So I had a question too, kind of related to that. Let's say you've got a part that is not in inventory. Maybe you're on a parts program, maybe you're not. And we had this happen to us. It was like an anti-skid brake computer. No one could find it anywhere. Jim, what are some other options if you're a director of maintenance or a chief pilot? Is there any advice you give them to try and find a hard-to-find part? Are there people that can help you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of, enhances that need to expand your supplier network and have contacts in your Rolodex that truly are product experts and know the aircraft well, and can, identify options for you when, a critical part breaks that, may not be readily available from the manufacturer. And, I think, obviously that's a very unique situation, but, there are aircraft that are parked, that we have utilized, our network to identify those parked aircraft to pull a part that's out of production, not available from the OEM, that we may need to borrow for a period of time to facilitate that replacement. And I think that just sort of, emphasizes the dynamics of our organization and our touch points within the marketplace to be able to, find an aircraft that's, maybe down for maintenance and doesn't need a particular component. And we have a relationship with the owner that feels comfortable enough to release a part that's out of production to help another aircraft owner facilitate their next flight, knowing that we can get the failed component repaired or replaced at a later time. But, I think this industry, is very much relationship driven, in having those touch points in the marketplace with those business jet owners and operators so critical. And then, again, having that network of suppliers within your Rolodex to kind of work on your behalf to problem solve is very important in not being, 100% beholden to, the manufacturer.
Yeah, it sounds like creativity is kind of the key right now, especially in this current marketplace. Yeah. What do you, I know it's impossible. I think Yogi Berra said predictions are hard, especially in the future. But what do you guys see in the next 12 to 24 months? Do you think these supply chain shortages and manufacturer issues, is this something we're going to be dealing with for several more years?
I think that we're going to run into some hiccups as, we're utilizing more older aircraft to supplement all the demand. A lot of these out of production aircraft, especially you start talking about interior stuff, cabin entertainment, DVD players, that kind of stuff. Those things are what the owner or the charter client is going to kind of see. And those items are becoming much, much harder to find serviceable working units. And I foresee that being an issue going forward.
I'm a proud Audio International user.
and
man,
like some of those interior completion companies, a lot of them have gone out of business or been
Right.
bought up, and a lot of those items, they were thrown away for an upgrade, but now they're regaining their value just because who's going to spend $250,000 on a Hawker 800 new venue system, right? So if you can find a monitor aftermarket or used out of a graveyard or whatnot, that's going to plug the hole. That's the route you're going to take.
Yeah, nothing like keeping an aging CMS system afloat. I thought the true, it's great when you have to extend the under. Well, we can't just replace that component but if we replace it with the new generation ones, then the switch panels won't work. But the new switch panels are a different design, which means you're going to have to redo all of the woodwork.
Yep.
And so yeah, it's going to be like $1 million to get your screen working again.
Right. There's brake issues, there's heat stack issues, Textron's out of citation brakes at the moment. So I honestly don't foresee it getting better before it gets a little worse.
Is the same parts pain, do you guys know, being felt on the airline as well? Or is Boeing and Airbus have their supply chain more together?
I think they have their supply chain a little bit in a better position than business jets, but I think that's largely driven by the lack of flight hours, right? And lack of utilization in commercial versus what we've seen in business aviation. So
I've seen probably seen a downtick in commercial versus the opposite.
Commercials definitely come back. I think it's getting close to the pre-COVID levels, but I think the supply was there, and I think it continues to be there. I also think the size of the aftermarket in commercial aerospace is a lot larger and a lot stronger than what's available in business aviation today. But, to answer your question, I mean, I think the supply chain it's not only impacted just by the manufacturers. I think it's also impacted by, or what we've seen is, the COVID impact for, just the operation of aircraft from the freight companies. I mean, we've seen freight companies that have had to delay flights because the crew has to be grounded because of COVID. And, they may have reduced their flight activity into a particular hub, which is, a major issue, right? If you're trying to get parts or shipments of any sort of goods or equipment out of one single location to another, and aircraft aren't flying in and out, well, then you're just sort of delaying the inevitable, right? And then, within the operators world, if pilots are getting COVID and they have mandates from their organizations where, they need to, quarantine for a period of time, and they have rental engines on their aircraft. Well, all that's going to do is sort of delay getting those rentals back into the rental pool to support the next requirement. And we're seeing sort of that have an impact, which is a little bit outside of just the direct manufacturing impact. But I think it's notable in sort of issues that we're seeing in the supply chain, more driven by COVID than just availability of new parts.
Yeah. And even, the repair shops, just having the talent and the staff to work on these parts. If they've got to go home for 14 days, that takes a guy off the floor, and that just, reduces the overall capacity of what that shop can put out.
So, Jim, you mentioned having a good Rolodex when you have to find creative solutions to find a part. I've heard a little bit about parts brokers being out in the marketplace, people you can hire to help you find a part. Do you know anything about that world, I guess? And is that a useful tool for department managers and directors of maintenance?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the answer is, a little bit layered. I mean, I think having the right supplier or parts broker working on your behalf is definitely something that can add value to your operation. I think the parts broker in general sort of has a negative connotation in business aviation. In commercial aerospace, I think it's a little bit more celebrated as commercial airlines are sort of racing towards, offering the lowest cost per seat, and driving costs out of their business. Business jet owners are sort of maybe not as familiar with, the availability of used serviceable material in the market and the value that it can add to cost savings in utilizing replacement parts versus just buying new from the OEM. Within JSSI Parts and Leasing, and I know within our own vendor network of parts brokers and suppliers, really consists, individuals that, really have a passion for aviation, that are creative in their approach, that are aggressive in finding opportunities to keep these aircraft flying in supporting owners and operators. They're hard workers. They're very knowledgeable on their products. There's a high level of quality control that goes into the procurement and supplying of these aircraft parts, to ensure safety of flight. Utilizing a parts broker or a parts stockist, an aftermarket parts supplier, can provide significant cost savings versus alternatives. And, I think embracing and supporting that market sort of helps any issues that we have in the supply chain and also just helps lower the operational cost for any aircraft. So, on behalf of the aftermarket suppliers, I'd like to see more opportunities and more collaboration in more companies in this space, to provide that service to aircraft owners and operators. And I think it's, will present value and, competitive landscape in the market, which I think is a good thing.
Right. I think that's really well said. I think you have to have all avenues, in this day and age right now to keep an aircraft running. You've got to be able to diversify. Well, fellas, we certainly appreciate your time explaining a little bit about the marketplace right now. We'll have all of the contact information for you guys in the show notes and on our website. If folks want to get some more information about JSSI Parts and Leasing and the valuable services you guys are providing to our industry right now. So we salute you for supporting us to keep Max and I flying. So appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us on.
You know how it is out here, Mike?
I'd say, well, I think you can tell that I do get a little worked up about parts sometimes, and that's the way the system works. It's just I can't stand it. I was trying to be cool, but
yeah,
he started getting me going about Honeywell and the HAPS program and all this stuff, and I just couldn't keep it under control.
You were also you're in an FBO with like a bad cell connection, and then you'd start going on these rants and then start cutting out, and they'd be like, "What
you
did she
should
say?"
see some of the looks I was getting in the FBO too when I'm like, "It's a scam."
Oh my gosh! So, man, what a world! But listen, there's always something fun to deal with in aviation. So, especially in business aviation. Hey, you know what I was thinking, Max? We've been kind of slacking on telling stories lately. So I thought maybe you and I could I have kind of a funny non-aviation Dylan's an idiot story I'll tell you. And I don't know, you got anything good?
Yeah. So I literally just came back from dinner with another buddy of mine that was in my initial that's sitting here at the hotel. We both live in the same town. We show up for the same commuting flight for the same reserve period. So we've just been kind of hanging out because and going to dinner and stuff. So he was telling me about he worked at Avantair up to the demise of that operation where those of you that don't know, they flew those Piaggios and it's like anyway, so
shout out Piaggio. We're getting a lot of Piaggio coverage.
I guess then when things are kind of falling apart and the passengers are getting pissed because things are not, so he's like, started to get the passengers were starting to be terrible and we were just getting really pissed with the passengers. He goes, so sometimes sometimes I'd finished loading the bags in their trunk or whatever, and then I would just take the bag of trash from the airplane and tie it up and just throw it in the trunk and shut the trunk and let them drive off. And I don't know why that is so funny to me. Could you imagine when you get home and you open the trunk and there's the bag? You're like, what? Where did this come from?
Did you pack this, Janice? What is this?
Where did this trash come from? Wait,
where did they take empty Fiji bottles?
Is that the Diet Coke I had on the airplane? Wait a minute.
So long, and thanks for all the fish. That's pretty funny.
So funny.
That is a really good power move. None of our listeners should attempt that.
And then he goes, and then he says, "Yeah, I was in Winnipeg when we got the email that like they'd been like shut down." And he goes, "So we hurried over to the terminal and bought the last two like airline seats out of Winnipeg." He's like, "I just wanted to get back to the country before the company credit card stopped working." And I guess their passenger was there that they were supposed to have flown out, was at the ticket counter, like yelling at the girl, pointing at the pilots, be like, "No, they were supposed to fly me, and now they're taking the last seat." I've never worked anywhere that, I guess that whole jet direct thing was the closest I've ever been to total meltdown, but we didn't actually work for them. So,
oh man,
I just thought that was funny.
That's pretty good. Oh man, I'm sure there are many other stories of similar operations cascading to an end. You're just praying for that company card to work one last time for the airline ticket home. Well, my story is not aviation related. It's just I'm an idiot related. But so this weekend was the big football playoffs. 4 games. And so on Saturday, the first game was the Titans-Bengals game. I was watching it. I have this TV in the backyard, and we're watching it in the backyard. And then my kid's like, "Oh, we want to go jump in the hot tub." I'm like, "All right." I heated up the hot tub, and you can kind of sort of see the TV from the hot tub sort of splashing around. And before I jump in, I turn the channel to the next game. And so we're sitting in the hot tub. I'm watching the next game. I can't really hear anything, but I can see the game is going. I'm kind of following it as best I can. And then we jump out after swimming around for a while and dry the kids off, and they go inside to go watch a movie. And I'm like, "You know what? We're in Scottsdale. It's beautiful. I'm just going to sit on my back patio and watch this game." So I'm sitting out there for maybe an hour and a half watching the Rams-Bucks game. And I'm just like, man, the Bucs were just getting killed. Tom Brady wasn't playing very good. I'm sending messages to all my like fantasy football group, all my football buddies.
I'm on these texts.
Yeah, you're on these texts. I'm like, the Bucs secondary is awful. Tom Brady, I'm just all these texts I'm sending out. And then my youngest son comes out and he's like, "Oh, it's time for bed." So I turned it off outside, went and put my kiddos to bed. And then I'm like, I'll watch the second half in the living room. So I turn the living room on, TV on, and I'm looking for the game. I'm like, where is it? And then I see like the 49ers Packers game is on. I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, what? And so I turn that one on. It's live. It's late in the third quarter. I'm like, what? I had been watching a replay of a regular season Rams-Bucks game in the backyard, yelling at the TV for a game that had aired, 4 months ago. I think it's the playoffs. Well, because the Rams and Bucks did play this weekend, and so I knew they were playing. And I'm like,
but that game had already taken place, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it was the next day.
Oh.
And I was like, I thought that was the next day, but I was like, whatever, it's the next game on here. I just wrote the guide. So I'm sending these texts. My friends are just like, what? So now, of course, I'm the butt of every joke now. And on top of that, I'm doing the dry January thing, so no cocktails or anything. So I'm drinking a bunch of club soda. Everyone's like, "Oh, lay off the club soda, ha ha ha." So I'm getting killed from every direction. So anyways, that was my moron. I will probably never live that one down. But anyways, it's surprising I can even figure out how to publish a podcast at this point. But
really, miracle.
Nah, that's it. Well, I think that's a good place to end episode 70, don't you?
Yeah, I do. We got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe. In the can already, even. We're getting ahead of things.
Exactly.
Feels good.
In the meantime, please send Max some Marriott points if you got them. You want to say your Marriott number right now?
This will be over soon.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to checking in with you guys with a new episode in another couple of weeks. But until then, remember,
flexibility, it's key to air power. Bye.
Run, dog.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.